you so much. Thank you. All right, thank you, and thanks for hanging around, and I know you're really waiting for the raffle after this. So I was here 2 years ago, and by that time, my timing was actually really good. Just coincidentally, we landed the first booster on a drone ship at the time. I think the mission was CRS-8, and it happened 2 days before I came here, so I was really worried that it might overlap, and I may have to cancel because I have to be on console, but it worked out perfectly, and it was great. And everything worked out so perfect that I was very worried this year it might not work out again. And however, it did actually work great. I'm coming mostly because there has been some updates. We've made some progress in certain areas, and I thought it's a good time to talk about that. Since then, we landed 24 boosters, and we landed 11 on land, and 13 on drone ships. We did refurbish them and fly them again, and totally we flew 11 refurbished boosters so far, and that's actually that's a pretty big deal. We not just recover them and look at them, but we also turn them around and get them flight ready and launch them again. And customers are actually getting used to that. When we started doing that, we had to do some convincing that this is actually a good idea. There's a couple of arguments that speak for recovery and reusability, not just economic considerations, but also reliability considerations. I will talk about that a little bit more later. Anyways, we think we achieved a higher efficiency on the rocket itself, and we achieved a higher reusability over these 2 years. We haven't flown boosters twice. That will come pretty soon, I'm sure. And we have a block upgrade plan that will make sure that we can fly more than twice on a single booster. We also worked a little bit on the fairing. We have some success on the fairing recovery. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, we launched Falcon Heavy. And it did, I mean, I expected some attention on Falcon Heavy overall, but it did still overwhelm us on how much attention we got. It was way more than we expected. We worked on Falcon Heavy for quite a while. It's a project that we basically started at SpaceX so that we have a vehicle that's capable to get heavy payloads into Earth orbit, heavier satellites into geostationary orbit, and of course, significant payload to Mars. The Falcon Heavy we launched on the maiden flight had 2 flight-proven reused, basically, boosters side on side, and it had flight-proven engines on the center stage. So it was basically put together from other boosters that landed before that. This is the whole picture of all the boosters that we recovered, and one of them is actually missing. That's the mission we had just recently, TESS, and I'm going to talk about that. And then these are the ones that are reflown. I'm actually not quite sure. I think the top row is the one that, when they were recovered, and the second row is the one that were reflown. I'm not quite sure how this works, but the message is basically we've reflown 11 of them. We had 100% success with that, and we learned a lot on all these flights. Yeah, TESS, exactly. So it's actually a nice bridge to this conference and the exhibit, obviously. TESS is a satellite that looks at the exoplanets by staring at suns and watching it blink, basically, to some extent. And I'm pretty sure you had some speakers ahead of me that are much more into the science part of that than me. And I just came pretty late to that mission and understood how important it is to do this and how relevant it might be for us in the long term. And then SpaceX, of course, wants to make humanity multiplanetary. So it's a nice mission both for us and of course for NASA too. It has an interesting orbit. It goes all the way out to Moon, almost. It actually has a lunar flyby that will catapult it into a higher inclination, and it will then be in a phase-locked orbit with the Moon. So, if I remember this correctly, it goes twice around the Earth by the time the Moon goes once, so that the Moon will always be left and right by the time it's at the apogee. So it's a really cool mission. It was really interesting to launch it, and it wasn't very big. It's a pretty small satellite for us in the big fairing. All right. Talking about Falcon Heavy, it's currently the world's most powerful operational rocket. There have been rockets that are bigger, but they don't fly anymore, Saturn V, and so on and so forth. However, it actually launches from the same launch pad as Saturn V, so it fits nicely into this, into the whole heritage of world's biggest rockets launching from the same launch pad. It can launch 20,000 kilograms to GTO and 13,000 to Mars. Those are just numbers basically, but what weighs 20,000 kilograms? Pretty heavy truck, I think, weighs that much. And slightly lighter truck weighs the 13,000. It's built basically upon a Falcon 9, and it is not quite as simple as sticking them together and bundling them up here. But essentially, we try to keep very many systems the same. And you look at what makes a rocket fly: batteries, computers, engines, tanks, and lots of these components are basically the same between Falcon Heavy and Falcon 9, which makes it economical and makes it possible to have flight-proven boosters on the Falcon 9 side, converted into a Falcon Heavy. The inaugural flight was on February 6th, and again, the historic pad 39A, everybody knows that pad, obviously. The two side boosters, the center core is actually a little bit different. I will talk about that later when I show it to you. We have a lot of thrust. It's 5 million pounds, slightly over that. And we have 27 M1D engines. It's basically 28 engines if you count the second stage too. It's a lot of engines. We looked at that to some extent, that we run more engine starts than some programs had in their entire program, because obviously the first stage comes back and has several engine starts, and the second stage performs several engine starts on orbit. So anyways, the liftoff weight is about 3 million pounds, and there's a lot of liquid oxygen. That's what we're using on our engines, LOX in short, and then 800,000 pounds of rocket propellant, which is a slightly finer kerosene than what airplanes use. On a Falcon Heavy flight, all three stages can return to landing zones, but we only had 2 landing zones to begin with. So the plan was on this one to go forward and land on a drone ship with the center core. There's some benefit in general if you do that, because then you can use all the propellant or more propellant on the center core and have it land downrange, and have the side boosters come back. So there's some the mission that we flew in this case, and I have a little bit of a schematic there. That's probably going to happen more often. This is a picture of the two boosters landing with like a long time exposure that tells you a little bit on how they wiggle around on the engine and still hit the center on those 2 landing pads. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, this one. So launch, everything's together, one pile. After a while, the boosters run out of propellant, and the majority of the work is actually done on the side boosters, because if the side boosters wouldn't do the work during the ascent, then you wouldn't need them. So obviously, you throttle the center core and you let the side boosters do a lot of the work to lift the rocket, basically. Each side booster then flips around, and you've probably seen this in videos. They have thrusters, cold gas thrusters, that move this whole side booster around with a pretty amazing rate. And then we ignite the engine to capture the stage and do a boost back. Where's the boost back? Do a boost back burn, basically. The reason this happens so fast is because we're going the wrong way. We want to go back to land, and we're moving this way with probably 1,500 meters per second ground speed by the time, maybe a little bit less. And obviously, when you're moving the wrong way and you want to actually go the other way, you got to step on the brake and make a U-turn, and that's exactly what we do here. You step on the brake, we make a U-turn, we accelerate back, basically. This is over here. It comes back then. In reality, this looks a lot higher, actually. It then performs a re-entry, and the re-entry is something that if you do an entry burn at the same time, the effect is not as bad as it would be otherwise. And so the entry burn is again a little bit tapping the brakes and making sure that the booster can get through the atmosphere without any damage or significant erosion. Then they fly, and you can see the grid fins by that time. That looks like a little T-Rex, but they're pretty effective in steering the vehicle and keeping it in the right flight path. And then at the very end, you see the landing burn again. We have different types of landing burns. We do sometimes one, we do sometimes three, depending on how much propellant we have. And I am not sure right now if this was a single engine or a three-engine. I think it was a three-engine landing burn on this one. The three-engine landing burn are the equivalent of racing on the wall and then hitting the brakes as hard as you can, and then just stopping by the time you barely hit the wall. That's basically what this landing is. You will see later how fast the landing is and how high the deceleration is right at the landing burn. Yeah. So when you when you launch a rocket, you got to put some weight up there because otherwise you haven't proven a lot. Yeah. And you also want to see how the dynamic response is and how the weight performs and how it feels. And when you do this the first time, I've flown rockets the first time, and it doesn't always go well. And then you have to go to the person or the team that builds the satellite and say, sorry, next time maybe. So, in other words, you put a dummy mass usually up there. That's the smart thing to do. And a dummy mass, if you put like a block of aluminum up there, that would have been okay. But in particular, actually, Elon did something with that I think was ingenious. Yeah? Putting a car up there and putting a dummy in that car. It's a dummy person, not a dummy mass. Yeah, it's just inspirational. Yeah? And I think we definitely succeeded with that we provided inspiration, and also a car is something that people can relate to. They know how big the car is, they know how heavy it is mostly. So it's something that people see every day, and putting this in space is pretty funny story to some extent. It doesn't make any sense at all. But I want to say, first of all, I would never have liked to launch a satellite. Satellites to Mars are super expensive. Things go wrong, and that would have been a terrible idea. And doing this was just, I guess we have some humor sometimes. There's a couple of things. There's a nameplate here that has names of all the employees. I put this picture up because when you see the car in space, it looks a little bit like it's just the car. That's not true. There's a frame around it that holds the cameras in the right angle, yeah? And the second stage is actually still connected to the car. The second stage never shows in the picture, but you can see when the car rotates, you can see that it doesn't rotate around the car, but it rotates a little bit below. Yeah? So it's always keep in mind there's a pretty big second stage here. Under it, it goes all the way down there, and the car is just on top of it. It just doesn't separate. Right. And then the orbit. The orbit does not go to Mars per se. It doesn't land on Mars. It doesn't go nearby. That's actually a little bit misleading there. But it is an orbit that goes between Mars and the Earth orbit, basically. Yeah? And I don't think it goes out that far either. But it certainly goes slightly beyond Mars. We didn't accurately target anything on the Mars side. We just made sure that we actually don't go to Mars because people actually wanted to make sure that we don't hit Mars and do something and have a car on Mars. Yeah. But we were careful not to hit Mars or get anywhere nearby, and it was more like a symbolic thing to say we're going to Mars. Yeah. Doesn't mean we actually go on Mars or something like that. And we've been very careful to actually point that out, but people always interpret that a little bit more. This was done when you launch a rocket. You go first into a parking orbit, and then you got to wait for the orbital plane to meet the ecliptic basically, and then you fire it off in the right direction. Yeah? And that took a couple hours. And then we did a third burn. This burn actually happened to be visible from Los Angeles. So we were sitting on console, and then somebody said, hey, we can see this, let's run outside. And we run outside, and we can see it, actually. That is pretty crazy. And of all places, the rocket showed this, the last orbit insertion, or rather interplanetary orbit insertion burn right over its hometown. I thought that was pretty interesting. And that is a picture with a simple telephone. It was good enough. It's not. You don't see a lot, but you got to keep in mind the vehicle is a couple of 100 kilometers up in space. Okay, this is the integration. We do everything horizontally, and then we roll it on this huge structure, and this goes uphill. That's the old shuttle tower. We have removed the movable part that used to be the clean room on the shuttle by now. So this is just a static firefight. I think the video should stop here. So before I continue with that, I got to tell you something. I can't just take my notebook and just start write a presentation. That doesn't really work because there's issues with company proprietary stuff, of course. There's ITAR. So if I would do this the way I wanted to, I would probably be in jail tomorrow, or at least unemployed. So what I do is what I can do, however, is I can take stuff that's there, yeah, and already public and the other in some form of function, or basically very similar to that. And that's what I did here. I basically have this is the webcast on Falcon Heavy, and I cut it into 3 pieces, and I'm going to talk over it and point out things to you that you hopefully haven't seen or heard before, and so it gives you a little bit more experience than just watching that video. On this one, I wanted to point out largely how we process horizontally, that we put everything together horizontally. The payload goes on horizontally. There's cranes. And then we have this huge structure, which we call TE, Transport Erector. And then that sits on rail cars and goes up the hill. The hill, I found it very ironic that we have actually problems with the hill in Florida. But the hill is actually pretty steep for such a structure. And in order to get it up there, you have to have tugs. It's not easy to move. It's several million pounds of steel. So moving this up the hill is actually one of the problems. Go figure that, right? You're trying to launch a rocket, and the problem is getting all the stuff up the hill. In hindsight, the shuttle used to go this hill up with the crawler, and I believe the crawler was leveling by the time it actually got on the hill. And it didn't move very fast. It moved, I think it was like a couple of miles an hour or something like that, or maybe even less. But I have newfound respect for this machine to move the shuttle and the Saturn V up that hill. That is a big deal, and it's not easy to do. And we learned that ourselves, that you have to put some thought into how you move this vehicle. And it's not just the vehicle; it's mostly the structure that holds the vehicle when it's fully loaded on the launch pad. Yeah, as we put it on there at the time. So it does get a lot heavier than just the vehicle itself doesn't weigh a lot, but it's a structure below that weighs a lot. So the next video, we have to turn the sound down a little bit because people went really crazy when Falcon Heavy launched, and in particular within SpaceX. And there's a couple of things that I do want to point out there. So let's try this now. Yeah. Falcon Heavy, go for launch. Oh, this is good. Perfect. So this is the voice of Ricky Lim, who's the launch director, Falcon Heavy. And then everybody at SpaceX apparently counted down too. 6. It's a nice gesture. 4, 3. When we ignite, we have about 3-4 seconds before we let go. And you see the structure moving back. Yeah? Just remember that, and I'll talk about that in a second. It clears the tower pretty fast. It accelerates pretty fast too. It has lots of thrust. It's hard. The mission control at SpaceX is a fishbowl. It has walls you can look into, and you can hardly hear a word with that, with the crowd outside.
If you can hear me over the cheering, Falcon Heavy heading to space on
Yeah, that's John Innsbrucker.
building on the history of Saturn V Apollo, returning pad 39A to interplanetary mission.
Why is that in there?
We're getting ready to throttle down for max Q.
Okay, here we go. And then the telescopes, they go overhead, and sometimes the perspective just looks like the rocket is going down, but it's somebody basically looking overhead, and that makes it look like it's going down there. I'm waiting for the picture from the onboard video, because that's actually the really interesting thing.
You've heard the call out. Vehicle is supersonic.
All right, here we go. So see if you can see motion between these two. Yeah? It's hard to see, but you can see a little bit of motion between them, and that's because the booster is attached in 2 points. It's attached at the back and attached forward, and that allows it to flex a little bit.
Side boosters to begin to throttle down prior to booster engine cutoff and separation.
I have to admit, I don't see it myself right now, but that's because it's a little bit grainy. So these are the views down from the center engine to the side boosters. These are the top one are the side boosters, basically, and when it separates, it goes very fast. You see the side boosters going away, and from the side booster, you see the center core go through.
Reports show that the M1D engine performance is nominal.
So here we go. Yeah, this is what holds it basically in place here. And then there's 2 struts that go left and right. You can see the grid fin over here too. It goes very fast.
Major event coming up with side booster shutdown and separation.
And that, I think, is the view from...
Side boosters. Beacon.
That's the center core view. Here we go. And we saw the center core going by the side boosters. That is pretty amazing.
Keeps going.
That was the key event for us. We didn't know if that's going to work or if it's going to do damage to the center core and the side boosters. That, I think, is the view from the center core, and those are the 2 side boosters. And I think the last one I have, let's see how far this goes. Down there, second stage. Obviously, that's what brings the payload to orbit. You see the center core actually going away there for a while. It flips around and performs the okay, so this is the end of it. So first, going back to the TE at the very beginning, when what I said. Remember this when it goes back. Yeah. So the rocket has to be loaded on the second stage. You need to bring all the propellants up there, and then you have to have a structure that is far enough away so that it doesn't burn down when you lift off. And so you have 2 choices. You can either build something that is has like a bridge and goes far out there, so it's far enough away. Or in our case, what we decided is we have short lines that go over, and we move the whole thing back at the time we launch. And that actually worked very well for us. We don't do this on all launch sites. We do this primarily at the Cape right now. And in Vandenberg, we still have the transport director that goes back a little bit more and then stays like that. The advantage on moving it back at the time is that you have very little damage from the rocket. After all, there goes a rocket by, right, and has lots of thrust, and it's very hot, and you want to keep your cables and everything you have on the other side protected. So that's one thing. I'm not sure you saw the separation, but the rocket basically is the side boosters are attached on 2 points, like I said, at the bottom and on the top, and the top part is the one that has pushers that pushes the rocket away, and the bottom part is basically something that unhinges. And you can see this pretty well, how it goes apart, how it falls away, and then clears the path for the center core to go by. Let's see, the next one I have, I think, is the 2 side boosters coming back. So these are the two side boosters, and I believe the right one is the leading one. There's points later where you can see one side booster in the other side booster's view. But you got to be really pay attention to that.
Did you guys see that? That
Different
was awesome. That's the only thing I can
commentators now, I guess, for the side boosters. That's Lauren and Mike, I think.
Oh man.
These are the.
Recapping all the great things.
This is the center core, and they all have deployed fins by now. And the second stage keeps going. The time is about the same for a second stage to finish its burn, and for the side boosters to come back to land. It's right around the same event. You see down there the coastline.
Chilling in the Tesla Roadster, just absolutely incredible. On your screen at the moment, you've got a few things happening. On the upper right,
Yeah, you can see I saw the side booster there.
On the upper left,
there.
You have the center core headed back towards the autonomous.
It's really hard to
spaceport
see, but you
drone
can see
ship.
one of them in the
And
other
two bottom screens, you've got
other
the
field of
side
view.
boosters
You see
headed
it
back
certainly when the
towards
landing run
Cape Canaveral Air Force
starts,
Station, landing zones
and
1
the landing run
2.
is not different from any other side booster that comes back to land, but it is amazing how fast they are, and you see this somehow. It's more pronounced when you have two coming back.
Is the re-entry burn. That's going to slow it down from, or slow all the boosters down from way faster than the speed of sound to just faster than the speed of sound, in order to reduce some of those aerodynamic forces and heating that occurs when you're moving.
He's pretty good in
quickly
explaining,
through
so
the
I'll let him
atmosphere.
talk. The flashes you see, right now you don't see any right now, but basically what happens is this one. That's basically nitrogen gas. That's high pressure gas that runs
And
into
as you can see on your screen, that
a thruster.
burn for the
Here's the
first
burn. You can see this one is this guy. It's not quite synchronized. And then after that, it goes into a new attitude, and the thrusters have to work again. This is the center core doing it a little bit later, and I think we do have some footage on the center core. That's why I'm actually showing this to you.
You can see the edge of Cape Canaveral in both of the side booster cameras as those are coming in.
This is the slightly clearer view. Yeah, this is actually how it looks when it comes back, and those are pretty amazing pictures too.
Those two boosters views, those are actually representing different boosters. They're heading towards Earth. They're about to begin their landing burns.
So
we'll hopefully be able to bring you nice footage of that.
yeah, you see how fast it goes. It's not. It would be super uncomfortable to be on that vehicle as a person. There's the landing zone. Yeah.
And that landing burn has started.
Yeah, and there's the other booster.
Both boosters looking to be on track towards their respective landing zones.
Side boosters landing legs have deployed.
And the Falcons have landed.
It was pretty amazing. Oh, I see. The center core is on the other video, the last one. The center core did not land. It missed the boat, unfortunately. But it missed it with. It was pretty dramatic. But it's in the other video. All right, I already said this. The center core, if you were to just tie them together and you would fly them in parallel, that would be all fine. It would work, but it would not be efficient because you actually need to put work into the center core, yeah, and into the second stage. So the center core, the side boosters actually need to push the center core in order to contribute. And then there's two places where they mount. One is at the bottom, one is at the top, and so they push the majority actually into the bottom of the center stage. And the top connection is the one that folds up after the separation. So the side booster fall away, and then the connection folds up so that the center core can actually go through its own reentry and land on the drone ship, at least in theory. So that is different from ordinary Falcon 9. Obviously, what also is different then is the bottom parts where you have to connect the three boosters basically together. Those parts have to be different. The lower one is actually it unhinges basically when the side boosters falls away, and then you want to move them away fast enough so that the center core going by does not cause any damage, and that also there's no recontact. And obviously that is something that you can test it, you can simulate it, you can analyze it, but at the end of the day, you need to fly it, and you need to show how it actually really works, and that's what was really important for us at this point in time. Well, switching over to the fairing for a moment here, we have been making progress. We're not quite done. The boat out there is the one that's called Mr. Stevens. And Mr. Stevens has a bouncy castle, sort of. Has a big trampoline on there. And the idea is to land the fairing on a parachute on that bouncy castle. And the fairing, actually, you can see the parachute here. It's there in the water. You can see it on the water. That part worked better and better in the last missions. It is not perfect, and we still have some distance between Mr. Stevens and the fairing, but we're getting there. The fairing itself, one of the reasons why this actually works is the fairing is pretty light and it's pretty stiff, and when it re-enters through the atmosphere, it's a little bit like a feather. Trying to find, there's no really good example how to explain this, but if something is low weight and has a large area, it can re-enter pretty easily, and doesn't take a lot of heat damage, as opposed to basically a cannonball that just goes through the atmosphere. That part would erode a lot more. So the fairing coming back actually looks really good. It's not there's not a lot of erosion or damage on there. I wonder if I can see this on this one. This one looks pretty clean. But I haven't taken a look at the one at this one after they recovered this. This was, I don't know, I think it was the last flight from Vandenberg, where we got the fairing so clean back. But again, the end game is to have the fairing on the boat so that it actually never goes into the water and never gets dirty. You want to keep the fairing, which is around your payload. Obviously, that has to be super clean, and you can't just fish it out of the ocean and use it again. It has to be caught in the net there. Here's another Outlook. That's a full-size Model 3 under it. They do exist. It's hard to describe how big that thing is, yeah? And the car shows a little bit. This is 9 meters diameter. What that is a form and a mandrel basically, and it's being used to build a tank on BFR, the big Falcon rocket, our next generation rocket. And it's just one tank. Obviously, you need 2 tanks per stage, and it's a size that's pretty unusual. In order to build this, I don't think you can load this on a truck anymore. It has to go on a ship. And we moved our production facility for this rocket into the harbor of Los Angeles, which is very convenient for me because I'm living pretty close to it. But this is the right move to get a rocket then loaded on the ship, and then you can drive to either launch site. The good part is also that launch sites are always near water, so that we don't overfly cities and anything else. So fits very well. I think it's big. I want to say this will happen, but the timing is always a little bit depending on things like funding, how much time we have. This is not something that is just something we finance ourselves at the moment, and obviously if you do that, your schedule has to have some flexibility. Otherwise, it could run you into the ground. But so that pretty much what I'm saying is be patient, more or less. Yeah, it will happen. We work as hard as we can, but when exactly this happens, that is a goal right now. Yeah, this one is pretty emotional. But there's an awesome scene in there from the Center Core landing. So I guess we can roll that.
It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mummy is yelling no, and her daddy has told her to go, but her friend is nowhere to be seen. Now she walks through her sunken dream to the seat with the clearest view, and she's hooked to the silver screen. But the film is a sad thing for she's lived it 10 times or more. She could spit in the eyes of fools if they ask her to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those gay men go. It's the freakiest show. Take a look at the low man beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if you'll ever know who's in the best-selling show. Is their life on Mars?
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Eicher, editor of Astronomy, and I'm here in beautiful sunny California at Celestron, the world's leading manufacturer of telescopes. Today we're going to get the lowdown on a secret, a new hot product that's unlike anything you've ever seen. So let's go inside and check it out. So Corey, Celestron has a really new, exciting, unique telescope. Tell me about the RASA 36.
Yes, the RASA 36, it's a 14-inch RASA. We have had the 11-inch RASA out there for a while now, and we have been secretly developing a RASA 36, a 14-inch version of it. It's still at f2.2, so you will get you very good speed, but with increased aperture.
And this is a really wide field, high-tech camera, astro imaging camera. You could capture incredible wide field views of the Milky Way, big vistas of comets, but there's a really special application that this telescope is perfect for. Talk a little bit about that.
We've been getting feedback from different people. One of them is from a lot of users in the SSA community. SSA stands for Space Situation Awareness. What that means is space junk detecting. More and more satellites are out in orbit, and inevitably they will hit one another, and they become space junk. A lot of them will stay up there for 25 years, and depending on in what orbit they're in, you can be up there forever. What SSA community does is they track these jump so that we can notify the satellite operators so they can maneuver to avoid them. We identify the need, we find a solution. We want to make astronomy fun, and at the same time we also want to keep everybody safe.
For over a decade, the FirstScope has been one of our customers' favorite products. It's easy to use, affordable, and provides really impressive views for a scope of its size. When the time came to update the FirstScope, I teamed up with renowned lunar imager Robert Reeves to create a telescope that would inspire the next generation of amateur astronomers to explore the moon.
Hello, my name is Robert Reeves. For the past 59 years, the moon has been my passion. Why? Well, the moon is the closest world to Earth. The moon is in our sky almost every night. The moon is close enough that we can see amazing detail on the surface with even modest telescopes.
The Robert Reeves Signature Series FirstScope is more than just a telescope. It's your guide to the moon. The telescope tube is a map of the moon's most notable features so you can learn the moon's geography. This telescope walks you through the basics and unlocks the entire hobby of astronomy, making it fun, easy, and accessible for everyone.
So I invite you to get out under the stars and enjoy a voyage to the moon.